The December wind cut across the Nebraska plains like something angry, sharp enough to make a person rethink every choice that brought them outside that day. Martha Henley kept walking anyway. Her thin boots cracked through frozen mud with every step as she made her way toward the Garrison Ranch. She had walked 8 hard miles from the stage stop, stomach empty, hands numb, and hope running thin. But desperate people didn't turn back, not when they had nowhere left to go. When she reached the edge of the ranch yard, she stopped and took in the sight before her. The house was long and low, built solid from weathered logs. The barn stood tall and straight, fences stretched neat and strong across the land, and everything looked like it had once been cared for by steady hands. But now the windows were bare, the porch cluttered with tumbleweeds, and a feeling hung in the air like something important had been lost. Martha pulled her thin shawl tighter and knocked on the door. Her first knock was too soft, lost in the biting wind. She tried again, harder. The sound echoed like someone tapping on a wooden coffin lid. The door swung open without warning. The man who stood there looked like he'd been carved out of the same rough wood as his ranch. Tall, broad, dark-haired, his face lined with years of fighting weather and grief. His eyes were cold gray, the kind that saw everything without giving anything back. "We don't need nothing," he said, already pushing the door closed. "Wait, please." Her voice surprised both of them. She straightened her back, trying to hold the last bit of dignity she had left. "I heard you might need help. I can cook, clean, mend. I've worked cattle before if needed." His eyes traveled from her worn dress to her calloused hands. She felt naked under his stare, but she held her ground. "Can't pay wages," he said dryly, "barely keeping the ranch afloat as it is." "Room and board is enough," she blurted before she could stop herself. "Just through winter. I'll earn my keep." Something shifted in his expression, not softness, but recognition, like one wounded soul saw another standing in front of them. When he spoke again, his voice dropped low, rough as gravel. "Only job here is wife in my bed." The words hit her like ice water down her spine. Heat rushed into her face as anger, fear, and humiliation clashed inside her chest. "How dare you?" she breathed. "I came here for honest work." But then she really looked at him, looked past the harshness, past the blunt words. There was no lust in his eyes, no smirk, no cruelty. Just a man worn thin, speaking a truth he was too tired to decorate. "I'm not that kind of woman," she said firmly. "Didn't say you were." His voice stayed steady. "Got a boy that needs raising, house that needs tending, and a man here who needs a wife for those things. Not a hired girl who'll leave when spring comes." Martha glanced past him into the house, a kitchen with 3 chairs but only one used. A child's wooden horse lying cold near the fireplace. Shadows everywhere. "Your wife?" she asked softly. "Fever took her last spring. Boy hasn't spoken since." Her heart twisted. She knew that kind of silence. She had lived inside it after her husband James died under a horse's hooves 14 months ago. "That's not a marriage," she whispered. "That's an arrangement." "Marriage is an arrangement," he answered. "Folks just dress it up to look prettier. I don't bother with pretty words. You need a home. I need a woman's hands in this house. Boy needs something I can't give him. That's the offer." She should have turned around and walked straight back into the cold, but her last dollar was gone. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Winter had arrived hungry, and she had nothing left to feed it. I want to meet the boy first." Something flickered in his expression, maybe surprise, maybe respect. "Come in from the cold then," he said, stepping back. "Ain't solving nothing freezing on my porch." Martha stepped into the house. The warmth inside was faint, but enough to remind her how frozen she truly was. She removed her shawl and draped it over a chair. He poured her a cup of coffee, thick as tar. "Name's Thomas Garrison," he said. "Tom." "Martha Henley." They stood awkwardly until movement in the doorway caught her eye. A small boy, no older than 6, stood half hidden in the shadows. He had his father's dark hair, but something gentle in his face that must have come from his mother. His eyes, wide, sorrowful, watchful, never left Martha. "Ben," Tom said softly, "this is Mrs. Henley." The boy didn't speak, didn't even blink. He simply stared at her, like a little wild animal, unsure whether to trust or run. Slowly, Martha knelt down until she was level with him. She didn't speak, she didn't reach out, she just waited. The boy stepped forward. From behind his back he lifted a small wooden horse, paint worn away. He held it out, not giving it, just showing it. Martha's heart cracked. "That's a fine horse," she whispered. "Does he have a name?" Ben's lips moved, but no sound came. Still, it was something. Tom watched, something like hope flickering in his eyes. "The offer stands," he said. "Marriage in name and duty, roof over your head, food in your belly, respect in my house. I won't promise love, but I won't raise a hand to you either." Martha looked at the boy, looked at the lonely house, looked at the cold outside. "I'll stay the night," she said softly. "We'll see in the morning." But deep down, she already knew the truth. She wasn't going anywhere. Morning arrived slowly, dragging pale gray light across the frost-covered windows. Martha woke stiff and cold in the small sewing room Tom had cleared for her. The cot was narrow and the blanket thin, yet she had slept deeper than she had in weeks. Maybe exhaustion had claimed her. Maybe the strange safety of walls and a roof had done it. When she stepped into the kitchen, Tom sat at the table with a ledger open, coffee steaming in front of him. He glanced up, nodded once, and returned to the numbers with a tired frown. Martha poured herself a cup of coffee. The larder looked nearly empty. Just a heel of bread, a few eggs, and a worn sack of flour. Hard times lived in every corner of this house. "I meant what I said yesterday," Tom said suddenly, still staring at the ledger, "but I'll make it plainer." Martha braced herself. "This ranch is hanging by a thread. Lost half my herd to black leg last summer, right after," his voice tightened, "right after Mary passed." He closed the ledger with a heavy thump. "What I'm offering ain't comfort. It's sharing the struggle." Martha sat across from him. The morning light softened his weathered face, making him look less like a carved statue and more like a man carrying too much alone. She understood that feeling far too well. "You could hire help," she said gently, "for spring roundup, when things improve." "Things don't improve," he said bluntly. "They just get a different kind of hard. And hired help don't stay. They don't know the boy. They don't know this house. They don't see the things a wife sees." His voice cracked just a little. Mary knew all that. A sharp silence settled. "So you want a replacement?" Martha asked, sharper than she meant to. "No," his answer was immediate. "Can't replace Mary, same as you can't replace whoever you lost. But the living have to keep living." He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I need a wife, Mrs. Henley, not for comfort in the night. I can sleep cold. But the boy needs more than I can give. The ranch needs a woman's order. And I—" He stopped, jaw working. "I need this house to feel like a home again." Before Martha could respond, a small figure appeared in the doorway. Ben, in his nightshirt, bare feet on the cold floor. His eyes flicked between them, wide and watchful. Without a word, the boy walked straight to her side of the table and stood close enough that she could feel his warmth. It was the quietest plea she had ever felt in her life. She placed her hand gently on the table, palm up, not asking, just offering. Ben looked at her hand for a long time, then carefully placed his wooden horse beside it, close enough to matter, not close enough to be held. Tom let out a breath that sounded like a prayer. He ain't done that in months. Martha swallowed hard. "Nothing is settled," she whispered. "You're asking me to bind my life to yours based on need and loneliness. To take on a child drowning in grief. To run a failing ranch. To share a house with a man I barely know." "Yes," Tom said simply. "That's exactly what I'm asking." She looked at Ben, at the way he hovered near her like she was the first thing in months that didn't hurt. Her heart tightened. "If I agree," she began carefully, "I have conditions." "Name them." "First, I need a proper bedroom. The sewing room is too cold." "You'll have the main bedroom," Tom said instantly. "I'll take the sewing room." Martha blinked. She hadn't expected that. "Second, I need some say in ranch operations. If this is a partnership, then decisions must be shared. You'll have equal say, books open to you." "Third, about Ben." She looked down at the boy. He stared up at her with the fragile hope of a child who desperately wanted something he didn't know how to ask for. "I won't replace his mother. And I won't force him to call me anything he doesn't choose." Tom nodded. "Fair. And if he never speaks again—" "Then we'll have tried," Tom said softly. "That's all anyone can do." Her last defenses crumbled, not because she wanted this, but because survival sometimes left only one door open. "When?" she asked quietly. "Circuit preacher comes through next week," Tom said, "or Judge Harper in town." "Next week," she whispered. "That gives us time." Tom stood. "I'll move my things today. Anything you need from town?" "Fabric," she said faintly. "Ben needs clothes. The windows need curtains." Tom pulled a small leather pouch from his pocket and set it on the table. "What's there is yours for the house." Then he left, limping slightly, returning to the cold barn. Martha stared at the pouch, heavy with the weight of a future she never planned. Ben tugged her sleeve. She looked down. "Breakfast?" she guessed. He nodded, and so they began. Moments later, she was at the stove mixing batter for flapjacks while Ben stood on a stool beside her, pointing to the ingredients with quiet authority. His silent guidance made the kitchen warm again, not from the fire, but from something far more precious. By noon, the house smelled of bread and new warmth. Tom stepped inside and froze at the sight. Martha at the stove, Ben tracing flower patterns on the table, the kitchen alive again. He didn't smile, not fully, but something softened in his face. "Smells good," he said. Ben looked up, and for the first time since his mother's funeral smiled. Small, fragile, real. Martha felt her heart break and mend all in the same breath. Whatever strange bargain she'd made, this moment made it worth it. Spring came slowly across the Nebraska prairie, but when it arrived, it changed everything. The snow melted into dark, rich soil. The air warmed just enough for the windows to stay open in the afternoons, and the Garrison Ranch, once quiet and lifeless, began to feel like a home again. By then, Martha had settled into her new life. She rose before dawn, stoked the fire, made thick coffee, cooked breakfast, and tended to the house. Tom worked the ranch from morning till night, his legs still healing but his steps growing stronger each week. And Ben, precious fragile Ben, had become the steady heartbeat of their days. He followed Martha everywhere, helping with chores, handing her spoons and pins, and learning to smile again. Their strange family had begun to fit together like pieces that were never meant to match, but somehow did. One clear spring morning, a buggy appeared on the horizon. Tom stepped out onto the porch, jaw tightening. "That'll be Catherine," he said stiffly. Martha knew of her, Tom's sister, proud, protective, loyal to her dead sister-in-law, and ready to judge. Catherine Garrison Whitfield stepped down from her buggy, looking like she'd stepped out of a Denver ballroom. Tall, elegant, and sharp-eyed, she took one sweeping look at the ranch yard, then at Martha, then at Tom. "Thomas," she said coolly, "and you must be the new Mrs. Garrison." She didn't offer her hand. She didn't smile. And she wasted no time walking straight into the house. Inside, her gaze darted over every detail: clean windows, fresh curtains, Mary's china in the cupboard, photographs set neatly on the mantel, the quilt draped over the rocking chair. "You've certainly made yourself at home," Catherine said. "This is my home," Martha replied evenly. "Is it?" Catherine scoffed. "After only 2 months? Mary lived here for years, built this place with her own hands, and now you sit in her chair. Use her things. Pretend to mother her child." Tom stepped forward, eyes flashing. "Catherine, But Catherine wasn't finished. "I came here expecting to find a house of mourning," she said sharply, "not a stranger stepping into Mary's place." Something inside Martha snapped. "I'm not replacing anyone," she said firmly. "I am surviving, same as Tom, same as Ben." "Grief," Catherine scoffed. "What do you know about grief?" Martha stepped closer, voice low and steady. "I buried my husband 14 months ago. I buried my home, my life, my future. And then I walked 8 miles through winter wind because I had nowhere left to go." The room went silent. But then a small voice, small, rusty, trembling, broke the quiet. "She stays." Every head whipped toward the doorway. Ben stood there, fists clenched, face flushed with the effort of forcing words out. His little chest rose and fell like he'd run a mile. Catherine froze. "Ben's sweetheart." He stepped closer to Martha, pressing against her side. "She stays," he repeated, louder this time. "Mama now." Catherine's hand flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her face. She had heard him speak again at last, and heard him choose Martha. Martha knelt and held him close as his small body trembled. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm not going anywhere." Catherine sank into a chair, all her sharp edges melting into grief she had carried far too long. "I loved Mary," she whispered. "I promised to protect her family." "I know," Martha said gently, "and you still can. This family needs all the love it can get." Slowly, painfully, Catherine began to understand. And when Ben proudly showed her his bean sprouts growing in a pot on his windowsill, his way of keeping Mary's garden alive, something inside Catherine softened completely. The rest of her visit passed in peace. She told stories of Mary that made them laugh and ache. She praised Martha's steady hand with Ben. She hugged her brother harder than she had in years. And when she left, she said softly to Martha, "You're good for them. Mary would want you here." Spring deepened, the ranch grew busier, the garden sprouted new life. Ben talked more, slept better, laughed freely. And slowly, carefully, a warmth grew between Tom and Martha, too. He began to sit closer to her at dinner. She began to catch him smiling at her when he thought she wasn't looking. And on quiet evenings, they stood together at the window, watching Ben chase fireflies, their hands finding each other naturally. One warm afternoon they walked the property line, something they'd begun to do often. "Never thought I'd have this again," Tom said quietly. "After Mary, I thought joy was done for me." "We all lose things," Martha said softly, "but sometimes life gives us new pieces to build with." Tom stopped, turned to face her fully. His gray eyes were softer than she'd ever seen them. "You changed this house," he said. "Changed me." "Changed him." "We changed each other," she corrected. He smiled, a real, warm smile. Then he kissed her. Slow, careful, full of promise. And Martha knew, deep in her bones, that something new had just begun. That night, after Tom carried a sleepy Ben inside, they sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars. Ben leaned against Martha's shoulder, already half asleep. Tom took her hand, their rings clicking softly together, his iron, hers gold. "Martha," Tom said quietly. "Yes? You think this is happiness?" She looked at the boy she loved like her own. At the man who had gone from stranger to partner to something she didn't dare name yet. At the house glowing warm behind them. "Yes," she said softly. "I think this is happiness." As the stars moved across the sky and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, their little family sat together, holding on to what they'd built from sorrow, necessity, and slow-growing love. Not the wild love of youth, but a steady love, a chosen love, a home. And they stayed that way long into the night, counting their blessings in breaths and heartbeats, knowing tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. But they would face it together,